Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Nina Ha, and I'm the director of the Asian Cultural Engagement Center. And this month of April is APIDAHM, Asian Pacific Islander DC American Heritage Month. And our theme for this month is a celebration of APIDAs. And this is the virtual mini symposium of APIDA's leaders in higher education. And this is the second part, the afternoon session of our mini symposium. So thank you all for coming. And before we begin, I would like to start with the land acknowledgement again. We acknowledge the Tutelo and Monacan people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live, and recognize their continuing connection to the land, water, and air that Virginia Tech consumes. We pay respect to the Tutelo and Monacan nations and to their elders past, present, and emerging. We also acknowledge the university's historical ties to the indentured and enslaved whose labors built this institution. We pay respect to these people for their contributions to Virginia Tech. And I am going to stop sharing and pass off the afternoon activities to Dr. Vincent Wong, who is the ACE Center's faculty fellow.
Thanks so much, Nina, and to all of our panelists. I'm really excited and honored to be co-organizing today's mini symposium with Nina and with the ACE Center. And I'd like to introduce right now Dr. Ellington Graves, who's the Associate Vice Provost for Inclusion and Diversity and the Director of the Africana Studies Program in the Department of Sociology.
Thank you, Dr. Wong, and thank you also, Dr. Ha, for inviting me to participate and introduce our panelists. Our first panelist, wait a minute, let me find my document, sorry. Our first panelist is Dr. Kenneth Wong. He is currently serving as Associate Dean of the Graduate School and Director of the Northern Virginia Center. Excuse me, he holds a Research Assistant Professor appointment in the Department of Physics. Since 2012, Kenneth has served as the Associate Dean of the Graduate School in the Greater Washington, D.C. metro area, which supports and strengthens the 35+ graduate programs in the region through the Graduate Student Services Office. As part of this role, he is also the director of the Northern Virginia Center in Falls Church, the primary Virginia Tech teaching facility in the region. The NVC is home to several departments and programs and will be the home base for the Innovation Campus programs while its first new building is under construction. His research background is in medical imaging, radiation therapy, image-guided interventions, and combat casualty care. He holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Brandeis University and a PhD in bioengineering from the University of California, San Francisco, and the University of California, Berkeley.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Graves. Let me see. Let me get the share screen going here. All right. Can everyone see that? All right.
Yes.
Let's see. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's great to be part of this event. And if you were not at the morning session, it was a lot of great discussion and great advice from folks with perspective outside of the university. And so we hope that this afternoon we can focus a little bit more on with the perspective from within Virginia Tech and our advice and our goals. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I always enjoy when I can have a chance to interact with more people within the university, because being at an extended campus location, I don't have the pleasure of running into people on campus as often as I might if I were in Blacksburg. So I'll just start with a couple of bits of wisdom. We were asked to think about leadership in this context, and so there's a couple things that principles that I've found very important, and I wanted to share them with you. So the first is that when you are in different situations and working with different people, it will really call out from you different leadership styles. There can be a tendency, if you have a hammer, that everything looks like a nail, and that you take your leadership style and you sort of apply it wherever you are. And I've found that that can work to some extent, but particularly different kinds of people need different kinds of things from their leaders. And I think most remarkably in the academic setting, what I found is that faculty and staff need different kinds of leadership, because faculty are interested in, kind of pursuing their research and their scholarship. They tend to be very independent minded about that. They want a particular kind of leader, whereas someone who is on the staff, particularly operational staff, they're really looking for a different kind of definition about where they're going to go, strategy, vision, and it's partly your job as a leader to help them find that and to help create that sense for them. So as you think about your own leadership trajectories, keep that in mind. The second point I have here is beware of oversimplification, and I think this is particularly challenging in our society today because of this idea that things have to be brief and things have to happen very quickly, and we have to be able to explain an idea in 30 seconds. And that's all well and good, but there are certain ideas that just simply can't be explained in 30 seconds, or there are important nuances that get lost. And one of the other, I think, important points for this particular group is that if you are trying to explain something which challenges the dominant interpretation or challenges the status quo, or is trying to shift people's thinking, it requires much more time to do that. Because if you say something which is in line with what everybody else is thinking, then everybody nods and says, oh yes, I agree. But if you say something that is challenging or difficult, you really have to have more time for that to kind of sink in, for people to assess this as a contrast to what they already know. The third point I'd make is that building up is always harder than tearing down. And I think as academics, we're naturally critical. We want to make things better, but it's always important for us to keep in mind as leaders that it typically takes a long time to build things up, and it takes a lot of energy. And for me, it's very important to respect that and to understand that the people who have spent time building things up, they've invested a lot of themselves in it. And you want to be careful when particularly if you're coming into a new situation, to be respectful of that time, to be respectful of that energy, and understand how some of these things may have come about. The other part I would say is that this has been a particular challenge for me as a leader, is that delegating is essential. You can't do everything, and it is ultimately not good for the people that report to you if you are doing everything, because you don't give them a chance to grow either. And the caveat here is that I always try to know what it is that I'm asking of the people that work with me and for me, because I want to have a sense of how much I am asking them to do, because it's very important for me to recognize things like work-life balance and to understand that someone's job is important to them. It's important to the university, but it should not be the sole focus of their existence. So I always try to make sure that I understand at least enough of this task to know what I'm asking of people. And I noticed on the first slide that Dr. Ha showed, there were sort of 3 C's for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and unbeknownst to that slide, I came up with these 3 C's, which are important for me: communication, collaboration, and culture. And my experience as leader is that a lot of it is really about communication, about making sure that you are understood, about making sure that you are open to hearing communication from other people, and just keeping those lines open and building those relationships. Obviously, in a university, collaboration is very important, and I think especially in our era, because many of the problems that we have just can't be solved alone. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to work across diverse groups. And then culture is one of those things that when you go to leadership seminars, they talk a lot about how you create it, how you foster it, how you generate it. And it really is a very powerful concept, because it talks about the kinds of things that are unwritten and the kinds of things that people just know how to do, or they know how to react. And what the organization says and what the organization does has a real big part of generating what that culture is. I'm particularly proud to work for Virginia Tech because I think that culture in many ways is very strong and very positive. So a little bit about how I got here, and I chose this image because this is a carpentry workshop, and that's really where I kind of started. I like understanding how things work. I like fixing things. I like the process of creation, and something like carpentry, or nowadays 3D printing or laser cutting or even software development is an important creative process besides being able to fix things. And so when I think about the things that have affected my leadership development, part of it is this desire to fix things, and part of it is a desire to be creative and to exercise that part of my my spirit as well. And I don't have a whole lot of time for this, but if I had my druthers, I would still have like a very sophisticated workshop. These are just some images of kind of my past and what led me towards the university career. Up in the upper left is the original console of where I first worked when I was just out of undergraduate. I worked at the Harvard Cyclotron Laboratory doing radiation therapy, and it was a system that was built in the 40s, so it was very much manual, very much all things that you could see inside and how they worked. So it was a great first opportunity, and it also propelled the rest of my career. I think looking back on it, you don't necessarily know the fateful decisions you're going to make when you make them, but this was one of them, was to take that job at first. And some other images here of things that I've worked on in the past. This in the upper middle is the CyberKnife robotic radiosurgery system. When I was at Georgetown, we did some great work on that as the system was being created and being tested. So it was really enjoyable to be working with patients and to be kind of in a situation where you could see what your results were doing and then have a kind of a direct effect on patient care. Some of the images along the bottom row are related to my imaging research, image-guided surgery systems, and then combination imaging systems that allow you to get more information out of the medical image. By combining two types of imaging together, you get more than what either one could provide on their own. And then some of these images over here on the right are from my work with combat casualty care, kind of designing medical systems for use in remote environments. And so I really kind of approach leadership from this scientific and engineering perspective. I've sort of always known I wanted to be involved in science. And so it was just a matter of, what kind of involvement is that going to take? And we were asked to think about mentors and people who have had a big impact on our life. And I chose these 5. And this is a little, this is always a little like asking which graduate program do I like best, or which of my children are my favorite, because there are a lot of people who have, had a big influence on my life. But being an academic, I've chosen some of my advisors, both from my undergraduate days at Brandeis, and then that was Dr. Cantor here. Dr. Hasegawa and Dr. Prusin were my graduate advisors as a PhD student, and Dr. Moon was my advisor when I was a postdoc at Georgetown, and he's now at Virginia Tech, so he kind of still leads our research group. And then Dr. DePauw is vice president and dean for graduate education at Tech. I've definitely been very fortunate to benefit from a lot of good mentors and people who were really looking out for me. And I think one of the things that really sticks in my mind is that a good mentor is going to challenge you, and they're going to sometimes make your life difficult. And that's what helps you grow, and that's what helps you learn. And kind of finding the right balance is, I think, is always the challenge. To push yourself harder, but not do so in ways that kind of leave you traumatized or broken. And I think a good mentor knows where those limits are and how to help you grow. So I include this because when I first took on an administrative job for the university, working as director for the Northern Virginia Center, one of my good faculty colleagues handed me this book and said, "You really need to read this book." And if you're not familiar with this book, it's basically a long set of cases about why administrators are evil and they're ruining the university. So I read it and I was kind of amused, that my colleague had decided to give this to me, but we talked about it afterwards, and it was I think a really good reminder that administration, particularly in a university, does not exist to serve itself. It's really about serving the students and the faculty and making the university kind of the best place it can be. And if we keep that in mind, as kind of our North Star or our, central vision, is that that's what the university is really about, then I think we can avoid falling into this trap of, are we administrators for the sake of administrators? Are we sort of creating work for the sake of work? Or is it directed towards the right things? And I'll just close with this this slogan, which is actually from where my wife went to graduate school, which is the Washington Theological Union, and this wasn't their tagline, but it was on some of their materials. It said, "Ministers worthy of the people they serve." And I've always kind of kept this statement close to my heart, because I think this says a lot about what I see leadership as being like. Is there are a lot of good people, particularly in the area that I work in, the university, the students who are here, the faculty and the staff who are here, that are doing a lot of good work and are really making a difference in society. And when I particularly think about all the things that Virginia Tech is doing, there's a lot of great activity that our university is involved in. And my job as a leader in this environment, or really in any environment, is to be worthy of those people and to be the kind of leader that builds them up, that recognizes their gifts and helps to bring them to fruition. So I will stop there and let the next person go.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. And we will definitely leave time at the end for question and answer, but we'd like to go through and have all the panelists give their brief presentations first. So our next presenter will be, excuse me, Dr. Shaila Mehra. Dr. Mehra has relatively recently arrived here at Virginia Tech and currently serves as the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences. She earned her PhD in literature from the University of Rochester. Her research and teaching foci are on African American art and literature, Black feminist theory, critical race studies, and Black intellectual traditions. She comes to us from Oklahoma State University, where she was director of the Africana Studies program and the Center for Africana Studies. She originally hails from St. Louis, Missouri, and is a second-generation South Asian Indian American. Dr. Mehra?
Thank you, and let me share my screen as well. Oops. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, so I can skip this slide because Dr. Graves just very graciously shared all this information with you. But as he said, I'm new to Virginia Tech. I started here last summer. I'm also somewhat new to academic administration. And so in this presentation, I thought what I would do is share with you a bit of my professional story. It is a story that is, in its broad strokes, not an uncommon story for women of color in the academy. And some thoughts about academic leadership and some ideas for how the university can prepare people for leadership roles. And so I think in terms of this bio, beyond my academic stuff, it is important to know that my academic interests, which completely inform how I do my work here, are the product of growing up in growing up in St. Louis, which is called the Laboratory for Housing Segregation for this country. And then also being the child of two immigrants who did not know a lot of that history and therefore couldn't teach it to me. And so that propelled me to study it and get to know some things for myself and for my own well-being and survival in this country. So I'm going to start by actually talking about my non-academic work experience, because what I find very interesting about the role I'm in and the way I do it is that it's much more shaped by the work I did outside of academia than the work I've done inside of academia in terms of core principles. So the first thing to know is that my path to academia and inside of academia was not terribly straightforward, and I want to actually encourage that in more people. I think that it's through the meandering and the sort of trying one thing and it led to another thing, and I figured out some things that I developed some of my administrative skill set. So my jobs after college were in lower level nonprofit administration and community-based grant making in St. Louis. And so I learned a few things from these jobs. I saw firsthand how a structurally racist society puts people in the path of harm. I saw other people working to build a safety net and community out of what seemed at times to be like dental floss and toothpicks. Really working with the materials at hand and not with enough resourced support, and yet building community for people. I worked first in a Black women-led organization, and then in an organization where I was immersed in a very diverse city community. And this was extremely formative for me. And I think it is formative and a necessary experience for people who have been in predominantly white institutions for most of their life to work with and for leadership that is leadership of people of color. And then lastly, I saw how people build community outside of organizations. And that led me to just a real appreciation for how people build community and build networks inside of organizations. So what I picked up from my pre-academic work experience is actually a lot of what the joy of administrative work can be. It feels really good to connect great people to each other to do great work. That was something I got to do in grant making. Another thing I got to do in grant making that feels even better is give those people money. I actually think that a really core function of being a good administrator is getting people the resources they need and removing the blockages to them doing the work that they want to do and they can do. And everywhere in organizations and in communities, there are people doing the work of building community, often without support. And many of those people are women. So I wanted a life and a job where I could connect people to each other, where I could find resources for them to do their work and support work that is essential, but sometimes invisible, sometimes not valued because not leadership. But I saw it as leadership. So after a few years of that work, well, more than a few years of that work, I left St. Louis for Rochester, New York to go to graduate school. My path through graduate school also involved some deviation from what you're quote unquote supposed to do in academia to finish graduate school and get a job. First of all, I moved in the middle of my program. And so I did my dissertation 100% in absentia. This was before the ubiquity of Zoom also. It was, we had phones, but it was not, we did not have the kind of connectivity that we figured out how to have this year. So I did my dissertation entirely in absentia. I also had my first child during the process of researching for my dissertation. And then I wrote the dissertation during her naps when she was an infant. And then mercifully, I was able to get some childcare so that I could finish the dissertation. And once I finished that and defended, then I jumped into a non-tenure track 4-3 teaching load position. Excuse me. After a few years of that, I moved to a different non-tenure track position where I was able to teach more in my area of specialization. And from there, I moved to the Director of Africana Studies. So all of this non-tenure track and looking out for these rare opportunities in organizations, it's not an unusual trajectory for women academics. It's especially not an unusual trajectory for women of color academics, but it does set us up not to advance. So when I sought the position of Director of Africana Studies, I did it in part because just for the sake of my intellectual development, I really needed to move into interdisciplinary work full-time. And I also really needed to work with like-minded scholars. And I've made certain decisions in my life about, I don't know, my first job, I made a decision I was never going to work in a job where I had to wear pantyhose, right? So I've made certain decisions. And one of them in academia is I want to work with like-minded scholars. So not just all scholars, but like-minded ones. And this is something that's important when you work in critical race studies. But the other thing is that, frankly, there was not a single other advancement opportunity available for me at that institution. And this is usually the fate of a career non-tenure track faculty member. And since there might be some people in charge of things listening to this, I want to say this is an incredible waste of people's knowledge and talent. That does not have to be. For me personally, whenever I feel like I'm treading water, I try to make some kind of move because I want to learn more. And my experience has been that this has not been easy to do in universities. And so this opening came up, I really worked for it. And when I got it, I just kind of put my all into it. And in doing that, it brought me back to some of the fundamentals of the previous work, the non-academic work. We built in that program people of color, community, almost all women community in that program. We were very intellectually engaged with each other. We really fought for that program because these programs are chronically under-resourced. And I was also able to figure out how to get resources to faculty. And I just felt I got back that little taste of it's really fun to make people's jobs easier. It's really fun to like redistribute resources to work that I think matters. There was also a real respect for the labor of knowledge production kind of in our group. So community, people of color solidarities, connections, and resources. This is the magic stew of leadership to me. So I'd say in terms of preparation for the role I'm in now, my teaching experience and the program director experience prepared me for this current position in terms of getting knowledge around academic affairs, curriculum development, working closely with faculty, really understanding the structures that, because it's people don't know, no one's going to come out and say we really don't want to support race and ethnic studies. But the structures of disciplines and the structures of colleges, the departmental structures really make that hard to do. So I got to see that up front, mostly by finding out all of the email lists I was not included in. That gave me information I needed. It's these little things, but they really matter. And then the other thing was that it was just some of the most pleasurable teaching of my career. I was the only faculty housed in that program. The program didn't have its own standing curriculum, so I was developing that. So I was doing so many preps. And so when you say you learn alongside your students, that was literally true for me since I was doing so many new preps. And it was so pleasurable. And I missed that. And then the other thing that I got out of that was I started to figure out what forms of persuasion and argumentation work in academic administrative contexts. Literally, how do you make the case for what you think is needed? And I got more comfortable trusting my wisdom that if I felt the need to fight, that it was because the fight was right. So what do I take from my own experience that might be more broadly applicable? Everything for me, hinges on the principle of connectivity. Connectivity across organizations, between people, and connectivity to money, connectivity to resources, connecting the past to the present. This matters locally, regionally, nationally, but also institutionally, because institutions have histories. And so I really appreciate, Kenneth, what you said about sort of building up is harder than tearing down. Because I think you have to know that history and what people have tried to build before you got there, and get to know some of the reasons why it may not have been able to persist. And I also, one of my sort of core practices is actually to be very, very intentional about meaningfully connecting with other people of color across the organization. I think it's essential for APIDA people to work with other people of color. I think we probably can all talk about experiences we've had with that, because in these institutions, our fates are truly linked. And when you're working in community with other people of color and allies, you know who you are accountable to. And that is helpful when you face pressures to be accountable only to the institution, right? Because sometimes the institution is going to not be of benefit to some of the people in it. And especially in a position like mine, I think knowing that line and where priorities are that's an important thing for me to be figuring out. So in terms of developing more leaders, this was one of the questions we were asked to think about. I'm in my current position because someone above me had a knack for talent identification and mentoring. That person saw that I enjoyed the intellectual challenges of academic program administration, and that's great. And I'm happy that it happened, but the amount of chance involved in getting me to this point is quite unnerving. For there to be more APIDA people in leadership, that process needs to get more formalized in academia. There are, in certain industries, that process is formalized. There is a talent identification director who kind of knows everybody in the organization. And so if you're in a starting out point, you actually know who is the person you want to try to meet to let them know, hey, I have these skills and I have these interests. And if there's something open that opens up, think of me. In academia, in my experience, that process is a problem because it is more informal, it's more implicit, it's very happenstance, it's very kind of luck of the draw. The gatekeeping is much more robust. And that is usually a recipe for keeping leadership looking exactly how it looks, which currently is white and male in most universities in this country. So the tiered employment systems in academia, especially around tenure, only exacerbate this. So when your work is devalued in the way that the work of non-tenure track faculty often is, in a place where research is the currency, right? People often don't see you as capable of leadership. And so add being a woman of color to the mix, and you can just, women of color are overrepresented in non-tenure track positions. That's why I'm kind of pulling this together. There are a lot of things that get in the way of APIDAs and other people of color breaking into leadership roles. So formalize the process. Formalize the identification and development of people of color into leadership positions. Do this proactively for people who are going to be structurally in a position not to be seen. That is something that I think at that sort of department head or supervisor level can be done, can be really important to identify leaders. But The institution has a couple of responsibilities to this also. Institutions need to make sure that leadership looks attractive to people. If what you see are overworked, burned out people who don't seem to be able to kind of get traction on their goals, like who would want to join that? Right. So people need to be able to see that if they move into a position like this, they will be actually able to do something. And then also institutions need to create leadership opportunities. And that means resources. Everything goes back to money with me. But it takes resources to create leadership opportunities. In my college, we lose talented, experienced faculty to leadership opportunities at other institutions. And I believe these opportunities could exist here and they would improve the scholarly life of the university. And so this is something, since one of my areas is faculty retention, that I find incredibly maddening. The learning curve is very steep when you move into one of these positions, but it's especially steep for people who, for whatever reason, have been denied access to academic acculturation. So institutionally, there need to be structures to set people up to assist them with learning that learning curve. Don't set people up to fail by not telling them all that little knowledge that they need to be able to understand how to maneuver in a new role. I also think it's beneficial to develop the knowledge of senior leadership, and I mean something specific here. Senior-most leadership would benefit from an immersion in the scholarship of critical race studies, because it's in critical race studies, in my experience and training, that where you get the best understanding of why institutions are so hard to change. And so the people who are really in a position to be able to change it need that very deep understanding. I mean, newsletters and articles here and there are great, but I think like everyone needs to be reading some of this foundational material to really understand how deep the structural inertia can be. And then the last thing is sort of to think about carrots and sticks, right? So again, when you incentivize diversifying your leadership, the ranks of your leadership with things like money, that can be helpful. But also creating a culture where this is expected means that you can potentially use the stick of shame to bring on board those people who might be reticent to making that move. So to APIDA people interested in leadership, I'd say go for it. Be prepared to learn a lot, be prepared to stumble a lot, and get yourself ready for these opportunities, because a lot of people of color have been working for a long time to get this space ready for all of us. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mehra. Our next panelist will be Dr. Sudipta Sarangi. He is, excuse me, Dr. Sarangi is the department head and professor of economics at Virginia Tech. Prior to joining Virginia Tech, he was a distinguished professor of business administration at Louisiana State University and a program director at the National Science Foundation. His research interests range from network theory to experimental and behavioral economics. He is a research associate of DIW Berlin, GATE, University of Lyon, Saint-Etienne, and the Lima School of Economics. He currently serves on the editorial boards of the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, the Journal of Public Economic Theory, Economic Modeling and Studies in Microeconomics, and his book, The Economics of Small Things, was published in 2020. Dr. Sarangi.
Thank you, Dr. Graves, for that very generous introduction. I am sharing my screen, and I will start by saying that when Vincent and Nina asked me to participate in this, I was not really sure about what I would say, but I felt that I have to say something, given everything that's been happening around us. So I just said yes without actually thinking what I am going to talk about. And then Vincent sent us these questions, and I sort of don't like structure very much. However, the more I read those questions, the more I realized how much thought and care Vincent and Nina had put into those questions. And they were really clever questions. And the reason I have affirmation of that idea is because what you heard from Kenneth and Shaila already tells you that I'm not going to be adding much. And in fact, I'm also going to say, I want their slides. So both of you, I will email you after this. And if you would be kind enough to share your slides, that would be great. So that said, I thought I would start with what I'm most comfortable with, my basic in economics. Now, economists generally, people think that economists deal with money. Actually, we don't. We deal with human behavior. And also then people will tell you that economists have a very specific way of dealing with human behavior. That's sort of a very cost-benefit analysis type of calculus. And there's some truth in that. There's neoclassical economics which does that. And then there is behavioral economics, which actually tries to build models of behavior that are not necessarily rational. So if you think about what economics has to say about all the events that are happening around us, I just want to start with this idea and keep in mind that these notions do not talk about the history of why these notions exist. They just talk about these notions, right? So there's this idea called taste-based discrimination in economics, which is attributed to the Nobel Prize winner Gary Becker. And it's very simple. It's like, I don't like broccoli. I don't like a certain type of person, right? So it's a very, very fundamental idea. It's a very simple idea. And it's the kind of things that drive things like hate crime, okay? You just don't like somebody, and that's why you oppose them. Then there is another idea of discrimination, which is owed to Kenneth Arrow, another Nobel Prize winner. This is somewhat more nuanced way of looking at discrimination. And Arrow's idea was that, if for some reason a certain group becomes associated with certain acts, without going into the history of it, let's be clear here. And even if it doesn't have to be the fact that there are more people of that group doing something, it's just the fact that somehow, if that becomes salient in your head, so for example, if for some reason you decide that people from a country, let's say Baronia or something, people from Baronia are more likely to be carrying a certain infectious disease, then every time you see somebody from that country, or they're more likely to be smuggling guns, every time you see a person from that country, you are going to check them. So it's basically a notion of stereotype, okay? And the issue here is that these are very complicated notions. Why? So imagine that in the world of professional economists, a person like Sudipta is going to be discriminated against, okay? What that does is that why society should care about these ideas is that when Sudipta learns that anybody with his name is going to be discriminated against in the profession for economists, then what is his incentive to go and study economics? Very little. What does that mean for society? There is people with substantial talent in different fields that are not doing that job. So for example, if we do not encourage APIDA leaders, then there will be people with substantial leadership skills that are not becoming APIDA leaders. And that's a loss for society. That's not just a loss for one community, that is a loss for everybody. That's the reason why we need to be aware of these things and why we need to actively combat these things. Now, I want to start a little bit differently because my journey is quite different from, I think, most of the people on this panel. I was born in the state of Orissa in India in a small town called Rourkela. Now, it's a small town by Indian standards, which means when I was growing up, that's 500,000 people, right? But it's also a small town because there was no television. You could not watch TV. You could buy a TV. You could use it to store stuff on it. You could use it like a mantelpiece. There was no TV when I was growing up. So needless to say, I did a lot of reading and playing, but yeah. So this is really Orissa in the eastern coast of India. And my town would be, this is a district, or what we would call a county. And I grew up somewhere there in a city called Rourkela. My father actually happened to be a professor, an engineering professor. And I would say that he was one of my earliest role models, because he did get into university administration. And I did see why it is important to do things for other people. And, in this journey, there are so many people who have been mentors, like my first grade teacher, Mrs. Meera Pradhan, a sprightly young lady of 85 who lives in Birmingham, England now. She taught us it's very important to be able to communicate. That's right, very effectively. My 10th grade teacher, Mrs. Satwant Mishra, who's now no more, she told us it's very important to be disciplined and to respect others. For example, in my class of 35 students, which all of whom were with me from first grade to 12th grade, more or less, you become like family. You spend more time with them than actually your own siblings. They are like family. Okay. To date, all of us will say that she was one of the strongest influences in our lives. Finishing high school, I moved from there to, so Rourkela is not even shown on this map. That's what I mean by little town, to Delhi. This is Delhi. This is a train journey through the heartland of India, 30 hours in the sweltering heat of India. You do this journey a few times in your life, you will understand what diversity is. You will understand how different people are. And this train journey, you can't do it anymore anyway. I can't do it anymore today. But this is a incredibly enriching journey. So that was my next stop. I moved to Delhi to study. And then Delhi itself offered its own things. I was involved in student politics. I understood the importance of caste in India. It's amazing when elections come. You may have all kinds of friends and you may stand for all kinds of ideas, but at the time of election, people will just go for homophily. They will go with their own caste. It's amazing how deeply ingrained identities can be. So these are things I learned in Delhi. And then from there, interestingly, from Delhi, my next stop was Virginia Tech. 1994, I came to Virginia Tech to do my PhD. Virginia Tech was a whole new world. Moving from Rourkela to Delhi was a whole new world because, my small town, I didn't have enough nonfiction books for me. In Delhi, I could get all the nonfiction books I wanted, and of course, fiction too. But moving to America is another whole different experience. I hadn't met people from too many other countries when I was in India. But here I came, I was in grad school, and you meet people from all over the world. It's completely eye-opening experience. You learn the diversity of cultures, diversity of food. That actually you already learn when you're in India, but music, tastes, respects. So I have this friend who came from Italy, and in Italy they park by squeezing cars between other spaces. So when she first learned driving, she tried to do that in front of Mill Mountain by banging the car in the little space, by banging the car in front of her and banging the car behind her, tried to squeeze her car in, and everybody's looking at her like, lady, what are you doing? So then from Virginia Tech, my first job was at LSU. This is again a completely different experience. You do not really see people of color at Virginia Tech. Certainly nowhere near what you would see in a place like LSU. Again, I realized that when you come from India to Virginia Tech, you're actually moving into a bubble, something that's not really representative of America. When I moved to LSU, that was a whole different experience. And of course, the summers there are god-awful. So the interviews are always in February, and then you show up there in August and you realize, my God, why did I accept this job? Then I spent 2 years at NSF. That was wonderful at the Social and Behavioral and Economic Sciences Directorate. And then it was my journey back to Virginia Tech. I came back to Virginia Tech in 2015 as the department head of my own department. I must say that throughout this process, there have been lots of mentors. At NSF, there was Nancy Lutz, from whom I learned about how to really look at research proposals. At Virginia Tech, I had some really, really wonderful teachers. My own advisor, Hans Holler, whom several of you probably on this panel know, is still there in the department. I think that much of what I know today is owed to my teachers at Virginia Tech. And I will hold for the next slide one of the most important thoughts that in my life that I've learned, and that's from Hans. Some significant dates, as I said, moving from Delhi, this opened my world. I had a completely different view of the world moving to Delhi, getting involved in student politics. From there, moving to Blacksburg was another enriching experience. And then the next important date was the move to Baton Rouge. This is where I actually first became Director of Graduate Studies. I learned to understand the difficulties of graduate students, the difficulties they face, everything from financial problems to visa problems, to family issues, to, when they're married, it's a whole different ballgame to be in grad school when you're married and you have a family. So I would say these are things that taught me to respect others, have empathy for others, learn to realize that, of course, my training in game theory helps, learn to think about problems by putting yourself in other people's shoes. And an important thing that happened when I was in Baton Rouge is if you look at this picture, I don't look anything like this, but there was a time when I did look like this. And then 9/11 happened. I didn't shave, but I can tell you how many times I've heard all kinds of things being said to me as I walked through the streets from my apartment to campus at LSU. This was a really, really difficult time. But I think one has to fight. And I made a decision I'm not going to shave my beard, regardless of what people yelled at me. And then, of course, back to Blacksburg as department head. That's me trying to look formal. So one of the things that Hans said to all of us when we were in grad school was that, at some point in your lives, you have to stop being a burden on the taxpayer and give back to society, which means finish your PhD, get back on your feet, and give back to society. And I think this is a very, very important thing that has stayed with me my entire life. And that's one of the reasons why I think I took this leadership role. Of course, the other reason was that this was an opportunity for me to do something for my own. For me, essentially, Blacksburg is home in America. This is the first place I came to. I have no, so when I came back in 2015 to Blacksburg, it felt like I was coming back home. And I had an opportunity to do something for the community that gave me so much. So that's another reason why I wanted to look at, or consider leadership. Of course, it's not been easy. I had not thought about APIDA issues, but once you become a leader, now I have to say I was hired by Dean Lei-Nam Chang, who was a very, very unique person in his own ways. He was a theorist. He liked abstract thinking. He knew a lot about everything. He had the ability to, understand people and their talents. He was very good at identifying talent. It's sad that he's no longer there with us, but I would say he was one of, he was the founding dean of the College of Science and one of the people who really made a difference. But after I came to the universities, when I realized that, if you look around you at the leadership of this university, or actually in most universities, you see that there is a big difference. There are very few people, APIDA people in leadership roles. And this matters because it is a signal to others. It is a signal to others about how you can do things and so on. Because there is this notion also people sometimes talk about is that some things, visible things, are harder to fight against than invisible things. So for instance, if you declare a minority as a model minority versus not, if you have if you have something that is viscerally targeted at another community, you can fight. But if you declare somebody, like when I on a plane, I'm often asked, Am I a doctor? I mean, in some ways, people will argue you should feel flattered. No, I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't mean that I cannot be good at other things. By assigning people certain characteristics or certain attributes, you are making it difficult for them to do other things. And so this is part of the thing that I think addressing leadership in APIDA is very important. And if you look around you, you will see that this really needs to be done. How do we do it? Well, thanks to Vincent and Nina, we need events like this. I have a student who's doing undergraduate research with me called Jessica Nguyen. I think Nina knows Jessica very well. Jessica does a lot of work towards these kinds of issues. We need these kinds of things. In the econ department, we are actually thinking of starting a minor that addresses issues of diversity, inclusion, and so on. We're working towards it to cover the history of these issues in this country, to think about ways of addressing these problems. So that's something we want to think about. I think we have to provide explicit mentoring opportunities. So you have to have, I think as Sheila mentioned, you have to have people that are actually willing to take up these roles and identify talent and mentor them. And I think more than anything at this point, we need targeted programs. We need possibly, maybe these kinds of events, but face-to-face, meetings. We need really money thrown in. I think Sheila is absolutely right that resources are key. But I think if you ask me what is important for leadership, I have very few rules: transparency, fairness, good food. I think happy people. Food always makes people happy. Happy people are motivated. Building team spirit, having sort of events that bring communities together, and so on. So, with that, I just want to conclude by saying, well, I think we are more aware and we recognize what's going on towards us. We are having events like this. I just think that the future is going to be better. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Sarangi. Our next panelist, excuse me, last but not least, is Dr. Daniel Sui, excuse me, who currently serves as a new arrival as Vice President for Research and Innovation and Professor in the Departments of Geography and in the School of Public and International Affairs. Excuse me. An internationally renowned researcher in the area of GIS-based spatial analysis and modeling for urban, environmental, and public health applications. Dr. Sui is Virginia Tech's Vice President for Research and Innovation. As Chief Research and Innovation Officer, Dan is responsible for supporting and growing Virginia Tech's research portfolio that includes the university's thematic institutes and affiliated corporations that execute more than a quarter of the university's sponsored research. The Office of the Vice President for Research and Innovation encompasses over 500 employees across research administration and encompasses 6 institutes and supports strategic research investments and all university researchers.
Can you see my slides now?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. High tech works. First of all, I would like to thank Nina and Vincent for their behind the scene efforts during the past several weeks to organize this event. And I'm really honored to be part of this panel to share with you some of my experiences. So I have really learned a lot by listening to all the previous speakers. And in particular, I want to say, Svita, I didn't realize that we have such intimate connections, not only through NSF, but also through our earlier work with the United Nations and the Food and Agricultural Organization. I hope we can get together to chat a little bit more in person in due course. So, by the way, I'm also very impressed by the map you used in your talk. So as a geographer, I'm always intrigued by maps when people use in talking about themselves. So very quickly, I would like to share with you my journey to Blacksburg, and without repeating lots of the things my other colleagues have already covered. I'm first generation immigrant to the United States. And for those of you who are curious about my Mandarin Chinese name, I have put it out there. I hope you can recognize those characters. So I was born and raised in the Manchuria, northeast part of China, Shangchun, Jilin province. And I did my undergraduate and master's at Peking University at age 16, and then came to the US at age 24 as a doctoral student. And in 1989, since then, I've been moving around quite a bit. Just very quickly, I spent 4 years at University of Georgia for my PhD. Then my first academic job was at Texas A&M. I stayed there for 16 years and climbed all the academic ladder, culminating as the inaugural holder of the Rita Haynes Endowed Chair. And then in summer 2009, I moved to the Ohio State University. I stayed there for about 9 years. So during my last 2.5 years at Ohio State, I was, doing the IPA at the National Science Foundation. After that, I spent 2.5 years at University of Arkansas. And the last November, that led to my journey to Virginia Tech. So I know it's a long detour. I'm not a Hokie by birth, but I like a Vincent, but I came to Virginia Tech and become a Hokie as quickly as I possibly can. So I want to first let this audience know who I am as a researcher and an interdisciplinary scholar. So I'm a geographer by training, but throughout my academic careers, I have collaborated with researchers in all disciplines, ranging from the traditional STEM field to social sciences, humanities, and even in the arts. So my work in the, as Wellington mentioned, in the general area of GI-based spatial analysis and modeling, but at both Texas A&M and Ohio State, I was also had a joint appointment with School of Public Health. And part of my work is actually related to disease mapping. So during the past 12 months, I have utilized that skill into some good use working on this project, mapping COVID-19. As we are speaking today, I just received the page proof of this book. Hopefully it will be out in print in 2 weeks. That's what I've been working on with my collaborator, Dr. Shaw at the UT Knoxville. So for this book project, we worked with 35 international collaborators from 3 continents representing 17 countries. It's really a comprehensive overview of what's happening, during the pandemic and what will happen, after the pandemic. So in the last chapter, I tried to bring in to see what we have really learned. So without labor, get into the details to by way of setting up the context. Here are the 4 key points I was trying to make in the concluding chapter of the book. Number 1, humans have made lots of mistakes in dealing with the pandemics in the past, but we don't seem to have learned a whole lot from them. Starting in terms of resisting public health measures, very simple things like wearing masks to social distancing, to many other aspects, for example, like opening too soon, to avoid a second or third wave. And also, all these sort of things, the amazing thing about working on the book is that all these things that happened 100 years ago during the 1918 pandemic or some of the earlier stuff. And also, most distressing of all, a particular ethnic group has always been singled out as the cause of the problem. And so all these mistakes that we have been seeing unfolding in front of our eyes during the past 12 months, nothing is new. It has happened before. Of course, the distracting thing is that we don't seem to have to learn from those past mistakes. Second, from a geographer's perspective, it's also very, very puzzling and troubling that most of the challenges facing humanity today, it doesn't matter whether dealing with this ongoing global pandemic or cyber attacks or global climate change, are really global in nature, all these challenges. And yet our reactions and the policy prescriptions, it doesn't matter whether you are looking in North America, across the European countries, or in Asia, or some part of Latin America or Africa. Our policy prescriptions seem to be increasingly having a national focus. So that's very troubling, because we won't be resolving any of those global challenges just by thinking about ourselves or putting our interests first about anybody else. That simply is not going to work. Third, more and more people are connected virtually by Zoom, by phone, by all the different kinds of social media. And yet, if you look at the bigger picture, we are more and more divided and polarized ever, socially, economically, and most distressingly politically as well. Last but not least, in this last chapter, I wish I had a more positive image, but I have to face this brutal reality. That is, technology has enabled the explosive thread of lots of wonderful things, scientific facts, all the various exciting new development in terms of innovation, but also it's simultaneously is contributing to the explosive spread of misinformation, disinformation, and fiction. For example, there is all different kinds of groups out there spreading this misinformation, disinformation related to the unintended consequences of vaccine. And that's really very troubling. So this is so apparently moving forward, we have a lot of more work to do. So that's a synoptic overview of my sort of research as a geographer. Although I have been involved in administration since 2004, but I have kept my research and teaching active. I'm about to give my first lecture to a group of the public affairs students next week on the future of work after the pandemic. So here's another track that I want to share with you in terms of my journey as an administrator and some of the leadership roles I have had. So my administrative experience started at Texas A&M between 2004 and 9. I served as assistant vice president for research, and from there I moved during Ohio State years. I was a department chair, and then also running 2 soft money operation university and college level research centers, and then I was served as social economic science, the SES division director at NSF for 2.5 years. And that led me to the vice chancellor chief research officer position at University of Arkansas. So during those, between those years, I also held the visiting positions at UC Santa Barbara, senior visiting scientist position at the United Nations Food Agricultural Organization and the CDC in Atlanta, and also the Woodrow Wilson Center. And all these experiences are really, enriched and expanded my horizon beyond my own academic comfort zone. That's, in hindsight, I think made my leadership roles more effective for the various positions I've held so far. So very quickly, before when we open up the floor, to answer your questions, since I came to Blacksburg last November, I have had about 2,000 in-person meetings and visits of various labs, but I counted that I have held more than 400 Zoom meetings. So just like everybody else, I've worked, remotely, and this is a really challenging time for all the researchers. But one consolation during all these Zoom meetings that I would like to share at a more personal level, that my grand dog from Philadelphia visited me twice. That gave me a certain level of comfort and joy during those stressful times. So what I have been up to since during my first month at Virginia Tech, I have been talking to all the major stakeholder groups. This is the moving forward, what we will be focusing on. So it's not public yet, it's still under discussion, but moving forward, Virginia Tech will zoom in these 4 frontier research areas as the guiding strategic guide, for our future investment, and also, to brand our national research identity. Again, I do not have time to get into the details, but very quickly, we are going to focusing on the health frontier, and the theme for Virginia Tech will be leading One Health towards whole health. And second is the AI frontier, harnessing the artificial intelligence for intelligence augmentation, AI for IA for short. And then the security frontier, innovating for secure and resilient communities. Last but not least, we are an integral part of the quantum leap that are happening across the academia, industry, and multiple government funding agencies. I do hope to find some time to talk to whatever group that you are connected with in a little bit more scientific technical detail. But today, I just want to give you this outline, what I have been working on since came to Blacksburg. But during those meetings, talking about those 4 frontier areas, I got the chance to interact with many faculty members, because for Virginia Tech's research enterprise, we have a very diverse faculty of all different kinds. Some of them are definitely superstars, and on both the national and the international scene. I can spend the 2 hours talking about all the international superstars, representing Virginia Tech. But here, let me just share with you 2 that some of you might know, that they are the members of the APIDA community. One is Lizzie Marr, currently the Charles P. Lansford Professor of Civil Environmental Engineering. She's a leading expert internationally studying the aerosol transmission of viruses. Built upon her previous work on flu and airborne diseases, Lindsay has been a leading voice, in mitigating the coronavirus during the past year. Her work, her lab has been testing, the efficacy of, different kinds of masks. Her work really has led to saving lives in the New River Valley area and much and beyond, across the country. So Another superstar I would like to mention is Dr. X.J. Meng, Virginia Tech's University Distinguished Professor, a member of the National Academy of Science. Dr. Meng is a leading authority in molecular mechanisms of viral replication and pathogenesis. You know, he has done some truly remarkable groundbreaking work related to human swine and the hepatitis E virus. But mostly importantly, during the COVID-19 pandemic, in collaboration with his colleagues at UVA, Dr. Meng and his team developed a new vaccine according to the early, the results that the new vaccine Dr. Meng and his groups are developing offer a much broader protection from coronavirus and possibly some other zoonotic disease pathogen and the viruses as well. That's a really remarkable work. Indeed, nothing thrills me more than talking about the achievements by our star researchers at Virginia Tech. But the harsh reality going on right now in the country is really far from ideal. You know, my wife and I attended the candlelight vigil organized by the local community commemorating the victims of the horrific shooting in Atlanta. And I personally, I was really moved by the solidarity of the local Blacksburg community in during that event. I saw people from all different backgrounds, different race and ethnic group, but you know, showing their support to the APIDA community during this challenging and difficult time. So moving forward, I would like to remind everybody this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. You know, in a letter he wrote from his Birmingham jail cell, that injustice everywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in this inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. So I hope the local APIDA community members should unite, keep this quote in mind in whatever struggles that we may have in our personal, professional life, you know, to work together, you know, join force with our like-minded colleagues from other backgrounds. I think eventually we will, through our constant efforts, we will improve the situation. Last but not least, I don't know whether you have seen this movie or not. I got a chance to watch it last week. It's a really a very deep artistic portrayal of what life will unfold in 21st century America. It already got accolades from the Golden Globe Awards, but it has been nominated for multiple categories for this year's Oscar. I hope that this movie and all the nominations will come to fruition in about a week or two. So, but I want to leave you with the quote from the producer and the director of this movie, Chloe Zhao. You know, she has an interesting background. She grew up in England and in America. She was born in Beijing, but educated in the West. Now developed a very successful, remarkable career in Hollywood. But this is not an easy path for her. So I want to leave, before we open up for question, I want to leave a quote with you. She once said that what I love about America is not necessarily the American dream, but the fact that there is so much spirit of fighting to continue to dream once the dreams are broken. So I think APIDA as a community here in Blacksburg, they have to face the brutal facts, but they never lose the faith about the bright future we may have together. Thank you for having me to be part of this panel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Su. So we've got a little bit of time here for some question and answer. If there's anyone present who would like to pose a question to any of our panelists, excuse me. I'd just like to begin just asking you all how you, I guess this question is a bit self-serving, how you all think about what it is that the university has been doing in terms of building a more inclusive climate and steps that you think that university leadership can undertake to impact the goals that we have.
I'm still relatively new here, but based on my first 5 months experiences here, I think I have to thank my colleague, Dr. Manna Pratt-Clark, because of her leadership in her office. I think the Inclusive VP initiative and all these strategic initiatives that her office has been leading has been really remarkable, has really made the difference.
So, if I may, I don't really know much, but I think Mena came after me, and I can see a difference. That's the thing I want to say. It's a very, very clear difference. I think she is making a change. I think we are much better today, and we're moving in the right direction. What I do think is we need to have more structured and formal organizations like this. And I think Sheila raised a very good point, which was about, for example, many of these programs, they get put into multidisciplinary units and they don't have a departmental home. And then you're constantly battling for resources because nobody wants to give you resources. You don't belong anywhere. So I think we need more structured programs rather than amorphous initiatives. And perhaps we should even, I think these things are already happening, like leadership initiatives for people, in minority communities. I think that's very important, but maybe some sort of mixers or open house for people who are considering leadership opportunities. What are the costs and benefits? Like, I know we have faculty in our department, and at some point, like for me, I can say, okay, I can write another paper. So what? At some point, you have to say, I want to give back to the community. I can keep writing another paper. Okay. So I think people get to the stage in their life when they are willing to do that. So we have to tell them the costs and benefits of making these kinds of decisions. What are the difficulties, how to do that? So I don't know quite what to suggest, but more structured things.
I would second that. There are structures for like the academic leadership program, and but I also think that the challenges that faculty of color who want to move into these roles face are different, and so basically developing content even within some of those pre-existing structures to address that specificity is really important. What I notice here that I find that seems very promising to me. So I want to second. I mean, I have not been here as long as Dr. Pratt Clark, but I hear what it was like before she got here, and so I feel confident in presuming you are 100% right, Sudipta, that there is a change. And in one place where I see a lot of possibility actually is in the number of women, and particularly women of color, who are in kind of assistant leadership levels, like mid-level, in the big offices, in the sort of the big organizational, the pieces of this university. So admissions and the graduate school and so on and so forth. And so Virginia Tech really there's a moment happening here where these people are here, and they're learning things. They're getting very effective in the institution, and those are the people who can be promoted into the senior level positions. So I hope someone is paying attention to this. And even just sort of, I mean, I know who I'm thinking of by name, who fits this model, and they need to be, there needs to be assurance that they're being mentored and given more opportunities to learn and to do new things, and to kind of develop their skill sets, because those are the people who learn and grow and do great things and then get recruited to go somewhere else and take all of that brilliance with them. So I think we are at a moment that we should not squander.
I've certainly been very impressed in the time here with the intentionality of the university's leadership towards diversity and inclusion, and not merely at the top, although the top is very important, but through all levels. And that's really come through in a lot of ways for the university. I think the area where I think about, we need to be on guard for is, I think there is a tendency as the university grows and becomes more prominent that invisible financial barriers start to appear, and things like, well, there's this great internship program, but it's only available if you can do this and you can go over here. And even though we don't say it and there's nothing that is explicit, that cuts that opportunity off to a lot of people. And we just need to be very vigilant about making sure that those hidden or invisible barriers get taken down, or we find ways to get over them.
Great. Actually, Shala, you raised a really interesting point about women of color, and I'm curious because I haven't necessarily done a survey along these in looking at this. But what about APIDA women? Where are we in terms of the prospects for APIDA women? Moving into leadership roles, and what might we be able to do to improve those prospects?
From what I can see, and again, I also am new, but I think the numbers are smaller, but I also think, I know the numbers are smaller, but I also think that these women are potentially well positioned to advance. The thing is, in terms of focusing on faculty of color versus disaggregating those groups, is that ultimately, I do think all of our fates are linked in an institution that is predominantly white, historically white, and whose sort of structural inertia wants to always revert back to whiteness. So I do think that there's not enough of us to where we can run the risk of disaggregating. I do think disaggregation is important in other areas, but I think in terms of leadership development, we've just got to kind of figure out how do we flood the zone, and that means thinking of us as a collective. But within that collective, I do think that APIDA women are numerically less. But I also think I also think that's changing. I think a lot of things are changing here pretty quickly.
Ellington, if I may throw out a suggestion, I don't know how leadership will feel about this. For example, the opportunity to shadow leaders. Can we think of something like, this happens in the medical profession. Maybe if we give people an opportunity to, for example, to shadow Daniel one day, right? Just get a sense of what his day looks like, what he has to encounter, right? So for example, one of the things that people often tell me is that when they're, especially minority groups, what they tell me is that, if you're a minority group in a large room, you feel like you're always under the spotlight, right? The beam is always on you if you're a very small number. So that already creates a certain kind of trepidation or inhibition. So maybe, I don't know if this is feasible, or I don't know how easy this is, but shadowing people.
Yes, Dave, we already have that. So for example, like in my office, if you have the faculty fellow program, right now, my predecessor used to, every academic year used to have 2 or 3, but because of the pandemic, currently we only have one. I believe it's Robin Quinn in the same department as Vincent. She's it's a 2-year appointment. So yeah, she's involved in all more than one day. She's participating in all the leadership meetings and also helping us out in some of the actual tasks. Yeah, so she has been advising me on like a cost share and the better manage the NSF, like a data management plan and all that. So yeah, but we can certainly improve to expand to make it more flexible. So
yeah, I was thinking even more like perspective, like, following Shaila for one day or following Kenneth for at different levels.
Yeah.
And no, there's something to learn from all of you. So an assistant professor who might be thinking of this, say 10 years down the line, maybe they're not ready today. But, during, I don't know, just a random day, and this is not very expensive. I think we should have a screening process. There should be a matching of interest. You don't just want to throw it open. Have this, and in the evening have a reception. I don't know, relatively costless idea to try. But people have to be comfortable to have this. Daniel, well, you're actually creating fellowships. That's great. And I know about the faculty fellows, but I didn't know what they do. So I know about this, but I didn't really know that this is what was happening. So thank you for telling us.
Yeah. So David, I like your idea to organize more event, all these programs of providing food, but I also want to share with the group, actually, I have something better to offer. Our food programs, in collaboration with the local brewery, 2 days ago, they just officially launched the Hokie beer. So we needed to make some productive use of the Hokie beer to organize more events and to bring people together.
I would suggest, actually, if we're thinking about something sort of very time limited, like shadow for a day or a week or something, that actually this is something to involve graduate students in. I think that the academic job market is what it is, and people need to have options, and people need to know what else they can do with PhD level training and experience. It's in order to it's a sort of ethical approach to this continual issue with the academic job market, is to think about, we are doing work that we were trained to do, but not the way we were trained to do it. But that doesn't mean that what we know isn't applicable. I think what I've learned is applicable every day for me.
Yeah, next week, I think I'm on the hook to host an event for postdoctoral fellows and doctoral students at Virginia Tech. The topic will be on developing alternative, non-traditional careers if you have a PhD, because right, yeah, that's a major challenge these days. There are not so many traditional academic jobs available, or even they do available, they are highly competitive. So, and then we have so many people have these marvelous skills. Some in some disciplines, they after the PhD, they have been, traveling around, have taken like 2 or 3 postdoc positions, but they still have not landed anywhere. So we need to help those folks to see what are some of the other alternative career paths out there so that they can pursue.
And I can easily see extending the graduate school's program on preparing the future professoriate, to include those kinds of avenues as well. I think that's something that's very timely for a lot of students.
And I think one of the things as well, I think, to Sudipta's point, so many of us who come in at least through the faculty ranks, it's the vision really is, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach. I'm going to do research. I'm going to write books and write papers and write poems, and to begin to sort of be more intentional about thinking about sort of what professional success and advancement looks like, and for other folks to sort of begin thinking, okay, is this the trajectory I want to be on? Do I want to be in 35 or 40 years? Do I want to be a faculty member in the classroom and focused primarily on research and scholarship? Or is there something else? Is there a trajectory I would like to eventually begin to explore? And to do that, honestly, as early as possible, so that gives folks time to want to get sort of that introduction to what these things look like, so that they can know, they may think they want to be a vice president for research and innovation, but maybe after a day with Dan, they realize, no, I don't want to do that. but at least to see what happens, and then to begin to think, okay, that is something I'm really intrigued by. What are my next steps? What are the things that I need to learn, and the skill sets I need to build in order to be prepared when the time comes? So I think maybe certainly not in that first year on the tenure track, but maybe relatively early on for folks to say, what does that look like? And as someone who is not tenured or on the tenure track, and Shyla mentioned this before, and I know Ken is similar. For those of us who are just on recurring contracts, but who are thinking about where what advancement looks like for us, to be more transparent and intentional about encouraging folks to explore what else is going on the campus.
I think time management is one big thing we could learn from people like Daniel, and I'm sure Kenneth. I'm sure, especially if you're also doing active research. I'm also doing that, Daniel, by the way. My co-authors are always virtually shooting at me for holding them back. But
I was going to say, don't come to me to learn time management. I want to find out from other people how it's done better.
As would I.
These are some great suggestions and points that were brought up. For those who weren't able to attend this morning, the common thread actually among our panelists in the morning was that they didn't have leadership or formal leadership training. And I think it was Shyla who mentioned, is it the correct type of training specifically, right, that would be beneficial, right, to APIDA community members as per the symposium right here. So I think having some of those mechanisms in place, the shadowing or a mini apprenticeship of sorts, it makes a lot of sense. And so the other lesson was that there was a lot of opportunistic right, elements, right, that led to, or that were part of the formula, right, for the leadership that we saw from this morning.
Yeah, I think that's, especially if you're coming to an administrative position from a faculty position, just this is what I mean by the learning curve. You know, when I was faculty, I did not have to know what the admissions office did. I did not have to know what, there's many gigantic offices whose functions are essential, that when you're faculty, you don't have to know about them. And the move into a more administrative role is, it's one of those, like, you know, what it feels like is one of those like Mission Impossible scenes where, you know, somebody's hanging out the outside of a train as it's going on that bridge with a huge steep drop into a river underneath, and you're just holding on. That's what that learning curve feeling feels like. And so, you know, I mean, I looked at something like the academic leadership program, and I think that that program is really good at breaking down, here's all these different offices and how they work together or not. And just giving that kind of information is really helpful, I think. There's just a whole other level of, you have to treat the university as a new research object. And what are its parts? How do they, what are they designed to do? What do they actually do? Are those things in alignment? And what does your role mean in the context of all of them? It's a different kind of intellectual and research problem, but we have experience with research problems. So I think if we treat it that way, that's just a good way to get us to capitalize on what we're already good at.
So I would agree with Shara on this. And there is one I would still like, when you come in from a faculty position to being department head, what does the department's budget look like? What are the different rows and columns in it? Believe me, it took forever to understand that. I think now I kind of understand what's the budget and how it works. But that's like, as Shara, you said, you know, they tell you about all these other units and how things function. And then the list of acronyms, which is amazingly huge. I don't know, Daniel, if you have seen that sheet. That's like 3 pages long, the list of acronyms at Virginia Tech. But this is one I would really like at some point in the future. This is what your department spreadsheet will look like. This is what each row stands for. This is what each column stands for. The other thing I wanted to say, I don't think that APIDA figures anywhere in that leadership training. So this is something, to think about. I mean, of course, I took it 5 years ago. So, it's old information.
You know, and another thing I might offer here is actually the value of events like this, because I do think in organizations, I mean, it goes beyond organizations, but when leadership has historically looked a certain way, then when you don't look that way, you're just not considered. And so seeing that there's a lot of us on this screen, and and we are all kind of engaged in administrative work in some way or another, and we're all doing it differently, and we have different personalities and affect, but we're all doing it, I think is really essential for broadening the imagination of people who are of leadership, to consider that because without that, what takes its place is the stereotype, right? The stereotype that Asians are, very good worker bees, right? Very good with technical know-how, but that kind of administrative or people-oriented. I mean, I think we're all good at it. But without having opportunities to sort of present ourselves that way in a collective, like we're doing right now, where people can see the shared, the similarities, but also the differences between us. That without that, then what gets filled in is sort of stereotypes of the dominant culture.
piggyback on that. Yeah, that's an excellent point, because I was, for the past several years, I have been involved in the APLU Council of Research. They have a leadership program designed to train the future chief research officers for universities. So I've been speaking to that group multiple times. This is because those folks enrolled in that program are very established scholars, faculty members that they try to get into research administration. And here's sort of the metaphor I sort of shared with them using the book, the idea I got from David Brooks' bestseller, The Second Mountain. He said, in each one of us, we have our career, we have two mountains to climb. The first mountain is to achieve your personal goal. And the second mountain is about serving others. That's exactly how I see the transition from a faculty to leadership role. For faculty, it's, faculty typical thinking is, what is it in it for me? How that is going to benefit my career, my impact, my citation. I told those folks enrolled in the leadership program, if you want to get into administration, you have to change that mentality. It's not about you. You have to think, what can you do using your skill to promote others, and to be really taking a deep pride and a genuine love of other people's work and achievement to promote them, because you have to, unless you believe deep down that their success is your success, otherwise you are not in this business to be chief research officers. So that's to lots of the people in the audience, that's resonates them quite well. So and for me personally, that has been really gratifying, because we all know in leadership positions, it's in a typical day, it's not all that good, wonderful stuff. So you have to be personalized in order to make those tough decisions, and also to navigate through the complicated political and sometimes massive financial landscape. But as long as you are in it to keep the best interest of the institution you are serving and the others' best interest in mind, it's not about you. And then I think you could be, at least that kind of philosophical outlook will make you a better and a more effective leader.
Yeah, that excuse me. That actually is an interesting point. I think it dovetails nicely with something that Kenneth was talking about in his presentation, which is to recognize the different kinds of leadership that it takes in an administrative role. And I think a big part of that is to recognize the different kinds of incentives that operate between the faculty space and what it is that operational staff, but for that matter as well, administrative and professional staff are responding to. That the kind of entrepreneurial climate that you generally find on the academic side is it's not absent, but it's less powerful when you move into administration. And I think the most successful folks are the folks who understand what it is that their team is supposed to be doing, and figure out how to support other folks in the pursuit of that. So I think that those are really good points, and I think thinking about that kind of incentive structure may be a helpful hint for people who are new to it, to begin to think through how their leadership style might need to change because of those different kinds of incentives.
Yeah, I am a great believer that people will accomplish whatever you incentivize them to do. So if you create good structures, you will get good results, and if you create bad incentives, you're going to get bad results. And kind of not being able to navigate those, and particularly to not generate perverse incentives. We talk a lot about that within the university, particularly not to generate those is very important for us.
Yeah, I think the incentives, as an economist, I obviously have to agree with you, Kenneth, right? People respond to incentives, and of course, not creating perverse incentives, right? Like the Cobra effect. Like the most famous stories about the Cobra effect is that the French colonial government in Vietnam, in Hanoi, decided to pay people for dead rats. So, of course, smart people of Hanoi decided to breed rats at home and bring them to the French government for money. The French government realized this is not working, so they stopped the scheme. So everyone that was keeping rats at home let them out on the streets. Now we have more rats than we had before. And no Pied Piper of Hamelin, of course.
If you don't mind, just being part of, the A Center, I was just wondering, how do we get more faculty, especially faculty in areas like, economics or especially STEM, to really invest in the work that we're doing in some way? Because I think also what I've noticed is APIDA students aren't getting the mentoring that they seek in many ways. And how do you incentivize professors who have biases against the APIDA community, have biases against APIDA females? I've noticed more and more students who started, especially APIDA women who started in STEM, who are now going into BIT or other areas. Like what, because traditionally the stereotype is we're all engineers and sciences in the sciences, and that's not the case, or all good at math and whatnot. But what happens when those biases converge and are challenged by the reality that some people are fleeing STEM, especially APIDA females, right? When you need them. And I'm just trying to figure out, how can I work better with all of you to help support the students, the graduate students, the undergrads, untenured faculty in this process?
That's an excellent question. Since I came on board, I have been restructuring, expanding, strengthening the area. What I generally call the research and development support has been a top priority for me. So for the OAPRI operation, I have been trying really hard. It's still a work in progress, because when people in my office talking about research and development support, so they are primarily concentrating on certain disciplines and focusing on the faculty. I told them, that's fine. That's traditionally what has been the focus. But I want to change the mission of our office to have a broader view. So I asked them, who are the researchers at Virginia Tech? So to lots of the people surprised, we actually, that's lots of people are involved, not just the faculty, but also we have research staff, we have postdoc, we have doctoral students and graduate students. And also these days, as a part of the experiential learning, undergraduate research is growing very strong in various disciplines. So I'm restructuring my operation. So we are developing programs really targeting all the researchers, not that the traditionally narrowly defined PI, so getting big grants from certain agencies. Those people are still very important, that we need to continue to support them, but we need to broaden the base. I think that's will be very helpful down the road.
My thought would be that if you want more faculty involvement, particularly female role models, I think if you write personally to them, expressing this view, and probably if you can also get some people that are present here today to add a couple of lines to that appeal. I don't know, you might just, I somehow feel that if we ask people nicely, that often works. At least you will get started. You will find some people. Of course, since economists respond mostly to incentives in my department when I want people to do undergrad research, so I've set up a departmental undergrad research internship, and I give the students some money and I give the faculty members some money. So that requires, I would say, resources. So that's the difficult part. But if you tell people, I don't know. I think if you ask people nicely, if they are looking for somebody, to do some undergraduate research work and talk, and it'll help. I don't know. I just feel that. I mean, I have two people in my department. I can ask them, Dr. Suchin Gay and Dr. Zhu Lin. I'm sure I can ask them, and I think both of them will agree. That's what I feel.
Thank you. I'll be reaching out to you this summer.
Nina, I think moving forward, a partnership also will be very crucial, because during my first 5 months or short stay here, I organized, we have a lot, because of the more decentralized budget model at Virginia Tech, we have lots of different shops doing all different kinds of interesting things. But that's great. But at a certain point, I think we needed to step up a little bit higher so that we can get those different units join force or partner to develop more joint programs. I think in that way, it will serve the students, the faculty more effectively. For example, we have promoting gender equity is research is a top priority for me. And I have been talking to the Women's Center. That's one very important operation. But I just realized that we have for example, to help our international students or international faculty to write better, to communicate better, both orally and then in writing. They have this wonderful Center for Communicating Science. They have a wonderful program. So what I'm planning to do is really bringing in, those different offices, all the stakeholders together, so that we can develop some partnership, so that we can join forces. Because lots of the things I need to do, I have to partner with lots of other VP offices. I cannot accomplish those all by myself or by ourselves. By all means, reach out and let me know if I can help you and your operation, your program in any way.
Thank you. I definitely will. Thank you, Dr. Graves, also for being here and helping. We appreciate you. And I know we need to be cognizant of time. So Vincent, do you want to take over?
It's been just a really highly educational day for me specifically, and I hope that our panelists have learned from each other, both the morning session and the afternoon session. Our guests, we thank the audience members for coming, and I guess to state it very simply, I'm just very fortunate to have all of you part of our VT community, contributing your insights, and I think this is a really important, a potential building block to move forward. I've heard a lot of enthusiasm about continuing the dialogue among the folks on this meeting right now, and that's very much my intention to do so with strong support right from Nina, the A Center, and I'll be tapping into the resources that we do have and your creativity. So very much appreciated.
Just one more plug. We have a lot of APIDAHM events to continue for next week and the week after too, and Dr. Sui as well, and actually Dr. Sarangi, also Jessica is going to be talking. So we have an inspiration series that focuses on people's research. So we focus on faculty and then graduate students and then undergrads. And next week we're focusing on undergraduate student research. So I hope that you can attend or share this information, and I'll share it with you. I'll send it all to you as well. But just wanting to highlight like APIDA research from an undergraduate point of view. And so I hope we can continue or actually develop a sort of partnership in that way too, because the ACE is trying to sort of highlight the APIDA contributions. And I hope you can also spread the word to your communities as well. And thank you for coming and attending and all of your support. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.